Find your story. Bulgaria, a discovery to share.
Good afternoon. I'm travel writer and Travel Perspective co-founder Mark Frary. With my colleague Steve Keenan, we've been putting on Travel Perspective sessions at World Travel Market for the last 10 years. And over that time, we've heard from heads of travel at some of the world's biggest tech companies, such as Facebook, Google, and Twitter. We've heard the stories of some of the most exciting startups in travel and the best connected travel influencers, as well as marketing thought leaders. Now, COVID and travel have been intricately linked since the start of the pandemic. Going back to the 3rd of January, the BBC reported on a mysterious viral pneumonia which had infected dozens of people in the Chinese city of Wuhan. And the first UK cases were identified in an apart hotel in York 4 weeks later. That seems like a very, very long time ago. And that same month, there was an outbreak of 10 cases on the cruise ship Diamond Princess. And a month later, some 600 of the ship's 3,700 passengers had been infected. And by early July, there were 3,000 cases associated with cruise ships. And at the end of October, the US Centre for Disease Control finally announced a lifting of the ban on cruises, although they still recommended against taking a cruise, as does the UK Foreign Office. Also in the pandemic, ski resorts came under intense scrutiny. In January, a businessman travelled to a sales conference in Singapore, where he is believed to have caught the virus from a fellow delegate. He then went on a chalet holiday to the resort of Les Contamines in France. And the chalet holiday was later identified as one of the first super spreader events. Now, skiing was also highlighted as a potential cause of one of the worst outbreaks in Europe, in northern Italy, while the Austrian resort of Ischgl and the Swiss resort of Verbier were all over the news because of their supposed role in spreading the virus. Right from the start, the way the world is crisscrossed by air links has been suggested as a reason the virus has spread so quickly. A TUI flight from Zante to Cardiff hit the headlines after 7 people from 3 different groups tested positive for COVID. And while various airlines have highlighted the low risk of catching COVID on board a flight, less than the risk of being struck by lightning, according to IATA, passengers are clearly nervous. A July survey for them showed that 58% of passengers said that they had avoided air travel, and a third suggested they would continue to do so in an effort to stop catching COVID. Now, despite evidence that when restrictions are lifted, many people are eager to travel again, the travel industry has a very tough job to do to rehabilitate their reputations. And while that all sounds very negative, we're hoping for a very positive session today to think about how the travel industry can get out of this. So in today's session, we hear from 3 people who have the job of getting cruisers, skiers, and air passengers traveling again. I'd like to welcome Joe Jamowska of Celebrity Cruises, Craig Burton of the Active Travel Group, and Lee Hazlitt of Virgin Atlantic. Now, Joy joined Celebrity Cruises' parent company, Royal Caribbean Cruises, in January 2005 as Sales and Marketing Director for the UK and Ireland. And she's recently been promoted to lead the setup of a dedicated team to support the Europe, Middle East and Africa markets. And she has previous experience with Walt Disney, Universal Studios and Thomas Cook. Craig has 18 years experience in the travel sector, 9 of these spent as CEO of winter sports and activities operator Ski Solutions, now part of the Active Travel Group. And last but not least, Lee is Vice President of Global Sales for Virgin Atlantic, covering agency, leisure and corporate verticals. He also spent 10 years at Virgin Holidays, where he led product purchasing, sales and distribution teams. Very much a big welcome to you all. I know a very challenging time in the sector for you all, and thank you so much for sharing your time and your expertise on this to think about and how we can share with how the travel industry can emerge from this crisis. So I'd just like to start with hearing about how you and your individual companies have managed in the pandemic. So Joe, I wonder if we could go to you first.
Thank you very much, Mark, and thank you for inviting me. It's great to be on the panel with Craig and Lee as well. Well, that was a fairly doom and gloom lead up to the last 8 months that we've all been working through, and it really has been significant. I mean, the cruise industry literally was in the eye of the storm, as you mentioned at the beginning, just over 8 months ago. We've learned an awful lot since then. Overall as an industry, travel industry overall and within the cruise industry. So our first priority was our guests, to get all of our guests home. Within the Royal Caribbean Group, Celebrity Cruises is part of that. We've got over 60 ships. So it's a significant task worldwide across all 7 continents to focus on getting our guests home And then, of course, our priority was also getting our crew home as well, which proved even more complex as many borders started to close around us as we were starting to get both guests and crew home. And in particular, from a crew point of view, we were unable in most cases to put them on commercial flights. We needed to put them on charter flights, or actually in the end, what we did is we repositioned ships and we, by continents, took our crew members home and made sure that we got a safe passage as best we could for all of the crew members that we needed to get home. So it was certainly a very, very challenging time. Since then, we have learned an awful lot, and we've put together the healthy sales panels that we put together with Norwegian Cruise Holdings, working very closely with the CDC in the States in particular, in order to work with them so they understand, A, the protocols that we already have, and the additional very strict protocols that we'll be putting on board in order to make sure that our guests and crew are safe, but very importantly, that our guests still have a great holiday. And that's what we're now working on. And I'm sure we'll talk more about that as we go through the next hour.
Thanks for that, Joe. Moving to you, Craig. I mean, obviously, this all hit just at the end of the last ski season, and obviously, you were having to get those people back, or arrange to get those people back. Can you just talk about how that process went, and then how you as a company have managed in the pandemic?
Yeah, thanks, Mark, and thanks, Joe. I think we all share similar challenges when this struck. Like cruise ski was very much on the leading edge of this. We were sort of 2/3 through what had been quite a vintage ski season, actually, and we were all looking forward to delivering March and April, but that all came to an abrupt halt, as we know, in early March. The sort of work from there has really broken down into 3 phases, and I think maybe we're just starting the 4th at the moment. The first phase really was much like Joe, just really focused around the safety and well-being of our teams, our people, and the repatriation from the Alps and North America for us, and then really the management of that refund and rebooking process, which has been acute for all of us. We have the right people in the right places, and those of us who are sort of grizzled enough to have been through previous crisis in travel, things like the ash cloud, had sort of given us plenty of preparation for the type of work we had to be dealing with to accomplish it safely and effectively. We then really moved into a sort of rebuild phase then from May onwards, and sort of similar to other sectors, we sort of really hit our straps in July, where folk were able to look forward into the winter with some confidence. Actually, I think we all started in March, April time, not ever believing for 1 minute that we might still be here in November talking about this, and it's influencing our businesses and our lives in the way it has. So there was a rebuild phase, which came to an acute end in July, the end of July, as consumer confidence ebbed away again, as travel corridors opened and closed quite abruptly. It's been a tough autumn for ski, as COVID cases have risen in Europe. Confidence has ebbed away for this winter, and it's been tough through October and into November. But I'll sort of leave my opening comments with what I think might be the start of the 4th phase now for us, which is those first very, very tentative signs of renewed confidence, driven by some of the developments we're seeing with regards to vaccines in the longer term, and hopefully a fit-for-purpose testing regime in the shorter term. So I think we're optimistically at the start of that 4th phase now, and we're already starting to see some of the evidence of that coming through the call centre, which is really positive.
Thanks for that, Craig. Now I'd just like to turn to you, Lee. obviously airlines are having a very torrid time among all of the other players in the sector as well. But you're the glue that sticks all of this together. And we've seen all of those figures about airlines losing $300,000 a minute, and everyone saying that they're reshaping their capacity and cutting routes, and everybody is suffering from this. And I just wondered if you could talk to us about Virgin's experience over this time.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. Yeah, absolutely, and thanks, Joe and Craig. Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to be with you today. Yeah, I'll spend just a couple of minutes just talking to you about exactly that from a Virgin Atlantic perspective, what we've been through, and how we're trying to get customers and consumers back traveling again, and win back that traveller trust. I think, to your point, it's an absolute understatement to say that the impact of the global pandemic has been devastating on UK aviation. Capacity is 80 to 90% down versus 2019. Very sadly, tens of thousands of jobs have already been lost across airlines, airports, and the wider aviation industry. People arriving in the UK from US and other high-risk countries must quarantine for 14 days. This really severely impacts the demand for overseas travel. And this is not just about Virgin Atlantic. This is about aviation just in general. We've reduced our network considerably. And looking at the latest IATA data, they don't believe that flying will return to pre-COVID levels to 2024. Close to home from a Virgin Atlantic perspective, when the pandemic took hold, it was a real fight for survival. We made a very difficult decision to stop passenger operations for a period of time, pivot our business to a cargo-only operation, and support NHS with distributing PPE and so forth. And we focused on protecting as many jobs as we could. Unfortunately, we had to say goodbye to nearly half of our colleagues. It's been an incredibly hard time. In September, more positively, we successfully completed the £1.2 billion private-only solvent recapitalisation of the airline, which really secured the future of Virgin Atlantic. But we know that we need to build confidence, and as a travel industry and aviation industry, we need to build confidence for people to book and to start traveling again. And we knew we had to adapt our policies and our processes and our procedures and really our product to get people traveling again. And of course, health and safety has been our number one. We've developed a wide range of rigorous multi-layered health measures, both pre-departure, at the airport and on board, to ensure customers feel like they're flying safe and they're flying well with Virgin Atlantic. And these measures are wide-reaching and constantly under review by medical and health and safety teams across our business at the highest standard. And really, that's about giving customers peace of mind to travel, and our crew as well. And we're trialing testing our crew as well pre-departure. We've also, which I believe is really important, we've provided greater flexibility than we ever have before to ensure that customers have that flexibility to change their plans if their plans change, or if, like we're seeing at the moment, in certain destinations, you see the change in travel restrictions. We also one of the first airlines to offer COVID-19 cover insurance. So if people do travel with us and they get COVID, they get insured up to £500,000, which is just further peace of mind. And we launched our Fly Safe, Fly Well program, which is, as I said, a really enhanced set of measures and communications and policies to how and what it will be like traveling with Virgin Atlantic. We are lobbying hard behind the scenes, and no doubt, I'm sure we'll get onto the conversation, and I think Craig touched on it as well, around quarantines and passenger testing and what that looks like. And we really believe that we need to take a firm position on a testing regime that ensures that the UK is able to open up further as we get into December. Obviously, the health and safety of our customers and our people is paramount, but we need to see the skies opening up again. And we really believe to be able to do that, we should have airport testing in place. But I think closing out kind of my open, yeah, it's been a long, hard summer to get to the point that we are now. We are seeing some green shoots of recovery. Even in the second lockdown, we're still continuing passenger flying to a lot of the destinations that are open, and we are seeing still a large number of customers freely moving that are allowed to move. But we know that there's still a long way to go.
Thanks for that, Lee. And we'd just like to move on to a more general discussion amongst our panelists now. And of course, as always, we're open to questions from the audience, and we'd like to see as many of those as possible. To ask a question, you use the question box at the top right of your screen. I know it's quite short, but so you've got to be brief with your questions, but we'll try to get through as many of those as possible. I'm glad you talked about cleanliness regimes there, Lee. What role do you think things like this that you're doing at Virgin, and also Joe, you mentioned the healthy sales panel there, how important is that going to be in getting people back onto planes, onto cruise ships, and what initiatives do you think will actually reassure holidaymakers? Joe, maybe you could talk about that.
Well, I think the key thing is communicating all the way through to our guests and our trade partners. All of our loyal guests absolutely know that everything that we do and everything that we're going to increase from the protocols point of view is going to ensure that their safety at all times. But what we did with the healthy sail pan is we put together experts across the field, from epidemiology, from within, really understanding what it is to make sure that it's objective advice, working with the governments, the CDC in the States. From the UK point of view, we're working very closely with the team together with CLEAR. So we have the Cruise Line International Association that's really setting standards across the industry. And that's a very powerful thing that we have as a cruise industry. So we've already committed to 100% testing for all guests and all crew across the board as an industry. We absolutely agree that testing is absolutely key. The sanitation from a point of view on board, to making sure that nobody can guarantee that nobody will get COVID until hopefully there is a vaccine. And as I said, this is the best news that we've had in 8 months, but it's still early days and we've got to be cautious from that point of view. So the mitigation of making sure that our guests are as safe as possible on board, and should there be an incident, how we can prove that we are able to depart any guests or isolate them, is absolutely critical. And then also from a crew point of view, making sure that we're regularly testing the crew and making sure that from that point of view, the crew's health is there and in turn for our guests. So we've got very stringent, there's over 74 recommendations that we put forward to the CDC. We are working with them on that now. We are now looking at hopefully doing some trial cruises that will then get the accreditation. And that's when from a US waters point of view, we do see light at the end of the tunnel, as we do here as well for the FCDO. And we're working very closely with the Maritime Minister, who's very supportive in all the work that we're doing as an industry. And of course, in continental Europe, there's greater optimism. As you know, quite a few of the cruise lines, our sister brand TUI Cruises is already cruising in Germany and in the Canaries. So all we're saying is we understand this is a pandemic. We understand that the health and safety of consumers is paramount. However, don't treat cruise any differently to the whole of the rest of the industry. Treat us equally. And that's what we're asking for as an industry. And that's what we feel strongly from an FCDO point of view, that hopefully we will see movement on quite soon. But at the end of the day, guests and crew health and safety is paramount, but we also know that we deliver great holidays, very safe holidays, and that's what we have people queuing up for. So the outlook is good. The future is there. People want to go on holiday. They want to cruise again. And we do not have a fear about pent-up demand, because we can see it significantly, that's what we do have as an industry overall.
Thanks, Joe. Craig, I wanted to ask you about whether the ski industry might go down that same route. I mean, Joe was saying there about 100% testing. Do you think, that's going to happen in the ski industry? And I know cruise is, it's a very premium sort of offering. I know ski is a bit as well, but perhaps less so than cruising. And is the ski industry going to be able to afford to do this, or will it be passed on to individuals to pay for that testing?
Yeah, it's a good question, Mark. I think the big difference between ski versus cruise varies that it's relatively fragmented and disorganized and disjointed compared to cruise. That's not to say that the industry as a whole won't get these protocols right, but the benefit cruise has got in the sort of lobbying and coordination that CLIA can bring to the table in terms of coordinating with cruise lines and authorities. Ski's not quite in that place, so we are having to work hard on a more fragmented basis, but individually trying to work through some of those challenges. We're certainly seeing all of the right things being done. We as a team have spent quite a lot of time overseas this summer meeting with suppliers, lift companies, the transfer companies, hoteliers, who are key parts of that supply chain in the Alps, and they are all addressing this, and indeed have had the benefit of a test run this summer. The Alps operated broadly with relatively normal operations through the peak July and August months. So they've had the opportunity to kind of hone these safety protocols quite some time ahead of the peak winter season. So we certainly go into the winter pretty optimistic in that regard. And whilst we can't in any way downplay the significance of getting these public health protocols correct, it is quarantine restrictions, not public health fears, that are currently preventing people getting on a plane and traveling. That is a challenge. I think there is a lot of trust, certainly for us, with our customers who we have worked with for 30 years, that we will look after the hygiene factors that need to be addressed as part of their holiday. The reasons that we're not getting movement is not that there is a distrust amongst the travelling public that these items will be addressed.
Now, Craig, I mean, I know, having worked in the ski industry for a long time, that the autumn is a very, very important time for you, because you're not a year-round industry.
Yeah.
And often October, November is when you're selling most of your product. And you touched on quarantine there, and most of the major ski countries have quarantine in place. I mean, most of the major travel destinations do as well. But how much of an impact is that going to have on the ski industry, do you think?
Yeah, I think we can't deny now, Mark, that it's inevitable that there is going to be a staggered start to the season. We can't look into December at this stage with any real confidence in being able to deliver normal operations. That is the reality, and indeed we're seeing that reflected in some of the decisions that tour operators around us are taking. Only today, the Hotel Plan Group, Spree, Ingham's, Total announced that they will not be operating ski in December, but like us, are very optimistic that we will be able to get operations up and running from the turn of the year. And indeed, as we look out to February and March, we certainly have considerably more confidence that we will have viable alpine skiing this winter. And I think we'll touch on that consumer confidence angle later. But the underlying feedback we are getting from conversations with our customers, from surveys and data coming out of the ski industry. The Ski Club of Great Britain polled a very large number of skiers in October, and the underlying message, 86% of those polls said, we still intend to travel and ski this winter if we can. So the desire, back to Joe's point, same with cruise, these cruisers like skiers, the pursuit of that is in their DNA. They will give up very many other things, food on the table, inheritance for kids, the second, third, fourth holiday to get in their core passion. And skiers have proved it time and time again that this is not something they are prepared to give up without a fight. So we as an industry need to acknowledge the short-term challenges. We certainly have, delivery in December is going to be hugely challenged, if at all. But as we look into the back end of the season with testing regimes, if we can get that right, we think we can get people safely back into the mountains and enjoying what is, after all, a pursuit you do in the fresh air with plenty of social distancing on the slopes. We want to be talking about zooming down beautifully groomed slopes rather than zooming on our PCs at the moment, quite frankly.
Lee, we talked here about airport testing, and I know Virgin, along with many other airlines, have said that that's really the way out of this crisis in terms of ongoing survival for airlines. And we heard from Grant Shapps yesterday that some progress has been made on this test to release scheme, whereby people will have a test on arrival and could potentially have reduced quarantine as a result of that. Do you welcome that news? Do you think things are going fast enough in terms of airport testing, and how does that help you with outbound passengers?
So we do welcome the news yesterday. I think, as you said, we've been quite vocal. Like most airlines, I would say most airlines are aligned and behind the scenes. We're actually all working quite closely together to lobby government. I think we need a firm commitment that a comprehensive testing regime will be in place in the UK in December to really boost consumer confidence and enable people to travel to the exact things that I think Craig and Joe just talked about. We need that regime, and as long as the 14-day quarantine remains in place, demand for travel will not return, and the UK's economic recovery, which really does rely on free-flowing trade and tourism, and it really can't take off unless we remove that 14-day quarantine. More than 30 countries have already introduced some form of passenger testing to enable travel without quarantine, including the likes of Germany and Iceland. And I think starting with test and release after 5 days of quarantine, which is great to hear yesterday, and the government's own evidence suggests it would be highly effective, would be a better starting point than the testing on day 7 or 8 if we want to see the UK's economy recover and ultimately remove that quarantine period, which I think certainly from an aviation period perspective, we all want to see that removed. And I think fundamentally we need a coordinated testing regime that is privately sector led. And we need to look at, how that's funded, but fundamentally our stance from a Virgin Atlantic perspective is we have to protect the vital resources from an NHS perspective, but we still believe that we can open up the skies and start opening up the economy with a testing regime in place. And we've already seen that from a partnership that Virgin Atlantic we've done at Terminal 2, where we've done a partnership with Collinson Swissport, where Virgin Atlantic's customers traveling to Hong Kong can already use a pre-departure testing facility. Terminal 2 is our temporary home at the moment until we go back to our terminal at Terminal 3. But the private service costs £80, but it aims to provide a departing passenger with a result within 60 minutes. And that's been accepted by the Hong Kong government, and that's enabled us to continue to see traffic flow between Hong Kong and London. And I think it's examples like that we need to see in other markets. And as I said, one stance from an airport testing perspective.
And what about the US market? Because for pretty much every airline, that UK-US axis is one of their most vital and profitable routes. So how important is it to get that restarted from your perspective?
Yeah, I mean, from our perspective, it's incredibly important. The US is the UK's most important economic partner, as you say. It's our It's our biggest export, inward investment and inbound tourism market. But since March, as we all know, and as certainly we felt as much as anyone, given 70% of our capacity is into North America, since March, non-US citizens can't enter the US. There's been quarantines of at least 14 days for US citizens coming into the UK. So from our perspective, it's very, very important. Looking at tourism alone, the UK is the US fifth largest inbound market. So it's worth 16 billion. It's highly important to them. So we urgently need action from the UK and US governments to introduce a testing regime so that travel restrictions can be relaxed and we can build confidence as soon as possible. We really believe, transatlantic flying, as I said, did represent 70% of our pre-COVID 2019 network. Circa 30% of UK visits are to New York, and London, New York is the third largest aviation market, to your point, Mark, in the world, with more than 30 flights normally a day. And we believe that is the point where we need a trial for a US UK test on both ends to open up a travel corridor between London and New York. And we believe that from an economy perspective and a tourism perspective, it's important for both. So, we urgently need the UK and US governments to start having those conversations. But let's hope with recent news that those conversations start to happen.
And Joe, I wanted to come to you. We're talking about reputation management here, and cruise and ski have both had reputation crises before. I mean, on cruises, people, are often talking about norovirus, for example, and I'll come to Craig afterwards about the ski sector. But even after those things happen, people still go on cruises. And can you learn something from that and on how we can get out of the current crisis?
I think we've learned that and so much more. On cruises, they don't talk about norovirus. The media tend to talk about norovirus, unfairly from the cruise industry point of view again. There's a lot more land-based cases than there are on cruises. But we've learned through all the crises. This has just been so exceptionally different, though, isn't it? I mean, Craig touched on it before. We've all lived through Gulf Wars, we've lived through financial crashes, we've lived through so many different things. But this literally is still around us. It's not in our control. It's not an event that's happened that's behind us, and we can now plan forward. It's around us. And that's why the vaccine is so important in that news. And that's why testing is so important, because there's no real proof that the quarantine is doing what it needs to do, other than impact consumer confidence. So I would say that we've learned more in working with the Healthy Sail panel again than we have done in looking at how we've handled different scenarios of potential sickness on board. This is a very different situation. Everything that we're doing is making sure that we can physically distance with our guests on board. It is changing all the time, though, and I think that's what's important, is that when we do start sailing again, the world could be in a very different place in different countries. One of the benefits we have is that we have assets you can move around the world. That in itself, though, is quite complex because you can't just make changes overnight. So we do need to really watch and see. We feel very positive about the protocols that we are putting into place. We feel positive about 100% testing for all of our guests and all of our crew, and for the trials that we hope are upcoming soon, when we then hopefully will gain the commitment of the CDC and the FCDO here to lift the orders that they've currently got, albeit the CDC one is far better now that they've lifted the no sail order, but there is still a conditional order. So again, I come back, we understand the pandemic, we understand the health and safety, but we think there are smarter ways to enable people to do what they want to do, which is to go on holiday, which for many people is a vital thing to do. It's about health and well-being, and to put more effective measures in place as opposed to relying on an ineffective 14-day quarantine, which gives no consumer confidence whatsoever.
We were getting some questions in from the audience now, and thank you for those. So if you do want to ask a question, use the box at the top right. I just actually had a couple of questions for Joe that have come through, and sorry to ask you while you're drinking your water there, but what do you think is what do you think is a realistic timeline for a restart of cruising? Particularly, there's a piece in the Daily Mail today talking about January restart, perhaps. And the second part of that question is: do you think when they do resume, will cruising start with limited capacity?
I'm not prepared to give an absolute date or month, because we just literally can't. All I can say is that things change literally overnight. And I say with this pandemic, an hour becomes a day becomes a week, and a week becomes a year. So we need to be careful from that point of view. Suffice to say that we do see that there's light at the end of the tunnel. And yes, the message this morning potentially is a positive message. I come back again that the conversations that we're having as an industry with the FCDO and with Robert Courts in particular, the Maritime Minister, have been very positive. They're impressed with the way in which we're collaborating as an industry and with the protocols that we're putting forward collectively as an industry. Because the other thing is, as much as possible, we want to make it as simple as possible for the consumers to understand and for our trade partners to understand, because the trade partners are critical to the cruise industry from a selling confidence point of view. So I'm not prepared to put an absolute month and time on it. It also depends around the world. And just again, we are cruising in places around Europe. As I said, our sister brand is cruising, TUI Cruises. So we hope it's soon. And who knows, if this vaccine really takes off, it could be even sooner.
And on the limited capacity question, do you think that's something that will happen?
Right. Yeah.
You operate large ships.
Yeah, good question. To start with, we're definitely looking at a level of capacity which would not be as high as the norm within the industry is 100% capacity. So we're definitely looking at a reduced capacity from that point of view to make sure that it will be, slowly as we go back into service. It's not going to be all 300 ships around the world are not going to be going back into service at the same time. It's slowly, itinerary by itinerary, and we will not be at full capacity when we do go back.
And Craig, I asked Joe about reputation management before. The ski sector has had its own sort of challenges. I mean, one that sticks in my mind is when Michael Schumacher had his accident, for example, and a lot of the soul searching that was going on then, and about what was on in the media about wearing helmets and things like that, and yet still people went skiing after that, and some decided not to wear helmets after that. So they're clearly a loyal bunch as well, and I know you talked about that before. I mean, is that the nature of skiers to look on the bright side of these things?
Yeah, perhaps. I think the helmet debate is an interesting one. I think after some of those much publicised head injuries that happened in ski, we didn't see any drop off in participants. What we saw was more people wearing helmets, which was, if there was ever to be a positive outcome from such tragic accidents, it was that. It was a slightly mad to think that ski was one of these sort of few sports where you would throw yourself down a hill at 50 miles an hour and you wouldn't wear a helmet, whether you'd be in a kayak, whether you'd be climbing, whether you'd be motor racing, whatever it might be, you would not wear a helmet. So I think actually positives came from there. And yeah, I think this is a resilient bunch, not just physically, but economically. Ski has got an affluent, solid base of consumers. We talk in the UK, there's, about 1 million regular skiers. There's another 1 million or so who identify themselves as skiers. But, this is a bunch of consumers who, through this crisis, a lot of them will remain financially fairly resilient. They've had, frankly, not a lot else to spend their money on for the last 7 months since this happened. They are desperate to spend and to get out this current lockdown and the restrictive measures that remain in place around leaving our shores. Unfortunately, with ski, there's not much we can do domestically, and that's to take nothing aside from our friends up in Scotland. We've got a business up in Aviemore, and there's some fantastic skiing up there that I've enjoyed. But the reality is, we're an island nation. We need to leave these shores to enjoy these experiences, and that's where all of our focus as an industry needs to be at the moment, around facilitating safe, quarantine-free travel.
And can I ask you a similar question to Joe about limiting capacity? Because we've had a question from the audience. I think it's quite interesting, about limiting places on ski lifts, for example, and in après ski bars and mountain restaurants. Do you think we'll see any sort of social distancing there this season?
Yeah, we certainly will. Covered lifts, gondolas, and the likes. Lifts, interestingly, for most geographies, most countries are considered public transport. So they are under the sort of guidelines that dictate how they are used. Will be, in France, it will be the same guidelines that they might use for the metro in Paris. So you will see face coverings. You will see restrictions on the occupancy of lifts, particularly covered lifts. And certainly from a restaurant experience and an après-ski perspective, this is going to look very different. The sort of crazy ishgal packed into a bar, dancing on the tables, drinking shots of Jaeger bombs are not going to happen this winter. There will be après-ski, but it will be socially distanced. It will be focused outside. And actually, for those of us who know and enjoy the mountains, this ties in very well to taking a break towards the back end of the winter, your sort of spring skiing, where actually it's quite feasible to be sat outside, enjoying the sunshine and a glass of rosé. Those are the sort of experiences we want to try and connect consumers with, and, keeping that in mind in terms of what that will look like. So it's going to be different. There's no doubts about that. But the core components of what makes a great ski holiday will still be available to us this winter.
Just to add to that, sorry Mark, I don't think we can underestimate, just talking about it, I want to go, right? I mean, I'm afraid I was one of those that didn't put a helmet on until after the accident, which was not good. But, everybody, I come back again from a demand point of view, and we've got to do it sensibly. Most people need to get on a plane to get to our ships. And there's a great correlation between skiers and cruisers, actually. You have a great time during the day, and you all get together at night and share stories. So I think from that point of view, we owe it to everybody as an industry to continue to fight the fight and to continue to make sure that we are showing everything that we are doing, and that we just need that support to enable our mutual customers to get traveling again in a safe and careful, because that's what we know. The R rate's going up at the moment. We understand that. We can't be illogical about it, but there are better ways to manage it than we currently are, and I think that's the key thing.
Thanks, Joe. Lee, if I could come to you, I've got a couple of questions for you, one from the audience and one from me. I mean, you mentioned there about insurance. And offering COVID insurance, is that sort of thing, that sort of initiative, likely to encourage people back onto planes, or are you going to need to do more? Are you going to have to offer deep discounts, for example, or better loyalty miles, that sort of thing, to encourage people back onto planes?
A few questions in there. I think from a COVID insurance perspective, we have seen that people, and we've received good feedback from customers. It's another added peace of mind, along with all of our health and safety measures that we've taken. So I think it's great that the cover covers any emergency medical costs associated to their transport for up to £500,000, as well as any additional costs for denied boarding or required time to quarantine in destination. It just gives customers a degree of peace of mind, and it was well received by consumers and our trade customers. I think with regards to deeper discounts and prices and so forth, I think we're going to continue to be an industry that is is based on capacity. It's a supply and demand marketplace. Interestingly, at the moment, if without sharing too much commercially sensitive information, we've probably got a greater focus, like most airlines, on flying cash positive routes. So anything that we are flying has got decent load factor with positive yields and positive cash on each rotation, because we are in a position where, like most companies, you can't afford to be flying routes or destinations that aren't cash positive. And I think we'll continue. Virgin Atlantic will continue to be as competitive as we always are. We're a challenger in this market against a dominant operator, and we'll continue to challenge that and create competition. And I think you'll continue to see that from us.
Just on the point of the viability of some airlines, I don't want to sort of talk about Virgin particularly, but do you think we're going to see wide-scale consolidation? We've already heard a couple of airlines saying they're having to have very serious restructures, and that they may not survive. But on that basis, do you think though that the airlines with the good reputations are going to be the ones that come through this, or is it just about who's got the most money in the bank?
It's an interesting question. I think I think there is as everyone will be aware, there's a number of different alliances out there from an airline perspective. From a Virgin perspective, what I can say, I won't speak about necessarily our competitors. Our business is very stable. We've got incredible support from Virgin Group as our largest shareholder, and then our second shareholder, Delta, who've been incredibly supportive. We're part of a transatlantic joint venture with Air France and KLM, who've both received support from the Dutch and French government, and Delta has well publicized done some refinancing of their own. So from a Virgin Atlantic perspective, we feel very well positioned from a refinancing, but then also the partners that we work with. We're working incredibly close as with our shareholders, but also our joint venture partners, to ensure that as where possible we create consistency for travelers from a health and safety perspective, to get people moving again post when we move hopefully into a testing regime and a vaccine world, that we'll be able to get consumers truly moving again. But we're definitely working incredibly hard with our partners.
And so, on that sort of point about, brands, I wanted to ask you, Joe, about this as well. We've heard, we had a session here yesterday saying about how traveller needs and desires are changing. People are looking for different sorts of experiences. Do you think there's any evidence that, the people are looking to change which brands that they book with to align more with their values?
We've certainly found that in the research that we've been doing. So outside of the intensive work on all of the protocols and the health return to service, we've also used this time to really look at our business and how we want to come back. And as we say, the look at how the comeback can be stronger than the setback. And I think any business that's thinking about just coming back the same, the old world has gone and we are entering into a new world, of which I think there's lots of positives, as together with the significant negatives that there has been during this time. And interesting enough, I think one of those is that time that people have had for connection and reflection, and really focusing on what's important to them, who's important to them, who do they want to spend their time with, how do they want to spend that time, and what do they want to do to actually give back as well, especially within the affluent audience that we're talking about from a cruiser's point of view and a skier's point of view, and those who fly on Virgin Atlantic. And certainly in the research that we've done with our guests and also with potential future guests, the values of the brand and the brands that truly have a purpose are really, really important and becoming more important. And in what you stand for, especially following on as well from Black Lives Matter and everything that's happened this year, the divisiveness that's happening around the globe, and we've really found that what we stand for from a point of view of equality, which has always been really important to us, the work that we've done on gender equality, on we've gone from 2% to 27% female officers in the bridge in 5 years. That doesn't happen without an awful lot of effort. It really doesn't. And I know a lot of the airlines are looking to do that as well from a balance from a pilot's point of view. We're doing that as well now within the BAME community, and very much so really listening to what our employees are saying, partnering up with Maritime, the Ghanaian Maritime organisation, to really make a difference. And from a guest point of view, guests who don't have those values or it's not important to them, we're finding actually are probably naturally moving away from us, or we're naturally moving away from them, because it is just so important to us and it's important to them. So I think it's going to be more and more important as we move forward into a new world. And I hope those positives we can continue to take forward with us, and we don't go back to some of the old ways.
Thanks, Joe. Craig, I was going to sort of link this in with something we were discussing before. I mean, do you think, you're sitting in a position where you sell lots of different tour operators and individual properties? Are people changing? Do you think what they, which sort of company that they'll book with based on their, the values that they represent, or the likelihood that they're going to remain solvent, or is it really all about discounting and they just want the cheapest price?
No, it's not about discounting. I mean, it's interesting. This was a sector that I think pre-COVID had swelled to the point where, there are an awful lot of parties out there, and frankly, not quite enough skiers. So I think there will be a shakedown that will have happened through this. I think in the short term, behaviours from consumers in terms of who they buy with is going to be driven by the experiences they've had through this COVID crisis. The ski industry has not universally shown itself well through this. Those businesses who have looked after their customers, who have refunded, who have been there to answer the phones throughout the crisis. We've seen examples of businesses just pulling down the shutters and disappearing. Now, I'm very sympathetic to that from a cost perspective, and I wish the Chancellor fully understood exactly what it does cost to keep a travel business running, because we couldn't shutter, otherwise we wouldn't have any customers. And I think the short-term behaviour is going to be driven by, was I looked after when times were tough? Is this a business I can continue to trust to look after me when the going gets tough? And I think that will influence a lot of buying behaviours. And we at Ski Solutions, across the whole active travel group, we have had to, we consciously have chosen to take a long-term view on this, which has had a severe cash impact in the short term. But we believe that by doing right by customers, that will pay off in the long run. There were some really interesting themes that were starting to develop, certainly within our business and across the sector, again, pre-COVID, the key one being sustainability and climate change. And I think some of that has had to take a bit of a backseat in recent months, not because actually we don't want to be there, but for example, we launched a big initiative in February this year, just before COVID hit, around train travel and the benefits of travelling to the Alps by train. 2 months after launching that, Eurostar announced that they had pulled the direct services to the Alps for this winter at least. We'll be out there lobbying as normality returns to the departure profile to get those trains back on, because we know there's a consumer desire to travel more sustainably and to get to the Alps and to enjoy all the benefits that train travel can bring. Sometimes, Lee, as opposed to taking a plane.
Lee, Virgin has always been known for its, marketing and publicity, and some great campaigns around that. Do you think we're going to see some clever marketing initiatives coming around when we do emerge from this? Not necessarily just from Virgin, but generally, just to try and encourage demand.
Yeah, I think I'd echo some of the points we've just heard. I think we've been talking to our customers, both talking to our travel agents, but also talking to our direct customers. And I think from a marketing perspective, I don't think it will necessarily be about clever marketing campaigns. It will be brands, fundamentally doing what they say they're going to do, focusing on if that's sustainability, if that's having a clearly defined purpose. Our purpose is to be the most loved travel company, and we know that during the last 6 months we probably haven't been at our best. It's been challenging for us, but we know that our focus is not necessarily going to be on a clever marketing campaign. It's going to be rebuilding that trust with our key travel agents and our key customers, and giving people confidence to travel again. Yes, you're going to continue to see some of the wonderful things that we do as a challenger brand and Virgin as a brand. But I really believe it's going to be, similar to what Craig said, it's going to be the substance of what brands actually deliver and how they look after their customers. And I'm really proud that we've got a phenomenal track record of doing that as Virgin Atlantic, but we also partner with some of the best travel agents that are phenomenal at doing that. And I'll go back to a point that Joe made earlier. I really believe that travel agents and travel agencies that have looked after their customers through this period will keep those customers, but they will be more important than ever before, because consumers are going to want confidence. I spoke to outside of leisure, I spoke to a business traveler of ours a few weeks ago, and this is someone that we would determine as a road warrior, someone that would travel transatlantically from London to JFK weekly, every week, 52 weeks pretty much of the year, and asking questions of me about how do I actually travel? When do I need to get to the airport? What does it look like? And I think technology will definitely have a part to play, absolutely. But travel agents and those businesses that have looked after their customers are going to be more important than ever before of the recovery of this industry.
I'm glad you touched on technology there, Lee, and I was going to ask you about that, Joe, because I was on one of your ships recently and had the pleasure of having a drink served by a robot. And I'm just wondering if we're going to see more of that sort of thing, more robotic processes, lots of touchless processes, just to encourage people to go.
Well, it's interesting. We were doing a lot of work to make it, because I think added to everything that Craig and Leah said is also simplicity and ease, as well as very much the trust side. And we were very much with our app working towards everything being as digital as possible, from an environment point of view, getting rid of all the papers, reams of paper on board the ships. But so, with our app now, your phone opens the door, it turns on your lights, it's your remote control, it switches on the TV, it does the blinds in the room, you order your meals, you book your theatre time, etc. So we were working towards that anyway. One of the big things is that we've launched during this time is Muster 2.0. So the lifeboat drill that happens before you depart port, that is now all on your app. You don't need to go en masse to the theatre or to your station. You have to prove that on the first day, that you have been there in your own time, and that you've registered that you've been there, and that you've actually watched the video for the muster drill. So all of these things we were working on anyway, actually, from a guest satisfaction point of view, and to make life easier and more enjoyable and less cumbersome and less paper. But actually in the pandemic world, it's even more advantageous. So I definitely do think that is a key thing. I think the human element is still great fun. The robotic bar that you're talking about is great fun. And generally they pour a gin and tonic quite well, but I still think that human touch of lime and a twist is worth it.
We're running out of time, unfortunately. I know that we could talk about this all afternoon. I just wondered if you could just give me your last thoughts. We heard some great news yesterday, obviously, about a vaccine potential. What are your sort of, one sentence about what that means to you and what you think that means for your sector, Craig?
Hugely optimistic. We have hope. We know it could be dashed, but we have hope. Testing. Do whatever you can. To everyone listening in the trade who has not yet lobbied their MPs, has not yet made some noise, testing is what is going to get this sector moving, and we need a fit for purpose testing regime quickly now.
Lee, what are your thoughts on the news yesterday?
I think it's incredibly encouraging. I think a vaccine combined with a clear testing regime at airports and commitments like we've seen in the cruise industry of the industry aligning and working together. I think you add all of that together and that really gets us moving again.
And last word to Joe.
I genuinely believe that the comeback will be stronger than the setback. I think I'm very proud of how we're working together as an industry, and very much so that, you know, we plan at Celebrity Cruises to be at the forefront of that. But people can't wait to get on holiday. I can't wait to book my ski holiday with Virgin Atlantic.
Sounds like you got a piece of business there, Craig.
There you go.
So that's all that we have time for today. I'd like to say a heartfelt thanks to my panelist, Joe Jamovska of Celebrity Cruises, Craig Burton of the Active Travel Group, and Lee Hazlitt of Virgin Atlantic for sharing their time and expertise on this difficult issue. We do know that the travel industry is very creative and resilient, and that if anyone can come back from this, it's the smart people of the travel industry. So we wish everybody the very best at this challenging time. So thank you all for listening in today.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Mark.